Kevin, welcome to the virtual stage.
Hello, everybody. It's really wonderful to be here with all of you again, and I'm just really grateful to uh, be here on this last episode. I mean, it's a great thing to understand about never settling for too long, as it is part of the title of my book. And as we all are looking at our lives, and we sometimes settle for too long, but we need to understand when to move on, and that comes from a variety of our feelings inside of ourselves. So I believe that this is a really timely expression of and finishing off of the nomadic mindset. And for many of you, you will be able to understand a little bit more how this is all about movement. And movement is crucial in this particular aspect, but it also plays into a lot of roles of who we are. Let me start with a short story from when I was sitting in a yurt. I was sitting in a yurt in Mongolia with my photographer, my guide and translator, and my mentor, and also the hosts that I was staying at in their yurt. And also, so we were talking about a variety of questions. I was asking first world questions, and the man of the house, and he all of a sudden he got up and he left. And he left, and I thought, why is he leaving in the midst of conversation? Anyway, and then he came back, he showed up again. We continued the conversation with his wife and himself, and then they both got up and left. And I thought, well, now what? We hadn't really finished our conversations. And I found this really quite funny to be with. But later I understood, and it really comes from this, is that he left the first time because he needed to change where the pastures for his cows. Because it's important to never let them overeat on one pasture. He needs to move them. So never settling for too long within that. And the next time that he went to bring them back in around the house. So he was bringing them back. He was bringing them back for the night. Now, what has this got to do with never settling for too long? And what do they look like, for example, when they never settle for too long? Is that what happens is that the nomads, and especially the Mongolians that we'll speak about, is they move only when the seasonal shifts. Otherwise, they settle for so many months and then they move on. But who is that is telling them? It is their animals, and the weather is starting to shift. So they need to move on to be able to find protection in the colder months. And so they moved closer to mountains, so it is more of a circulated around so that there is some warmth, but it is not cold. So never settling for too long is extremely important within nomadic cultures. They don't always move, move, move. No, they settle, and when they have reaped the harvest of where they are, they move on. And this is exactly where we are in our lives, is about understanding this. And there's a few things that I would like to share with you, especially when we're talking about uncertainty in our lives and all sorts of unpredictabilities and the situations which are happening within organizations with the onset of digital transformation, which has been around for a long time, AI transformation, and perhaps loss of jobs because of all of this. There's a lot of uncertainty. And understanding that never settling for too long is actually a good thing. And it can be a good thing, but you have to be ready for that. Now, for this, I want to share that sometimes when you never settle for too long, part of the comfort seduces us, which stops us in many ways from never settling for too long. And at the same time, comfort can seduce us to never settle for too long, to move on as well. But one of the most important things here is curiosity. And with the nomads, there's a huge amount of curiosity. For us today, and one of the most important aspects of the organizations is for us to build and bring out that incredible amount of curiosity, which awakens us in every aspect and every part of the layers of organizations, at all the levels of organizations. Is curiosity is awakening within, and never settling for too long allows that curiosity to be able to now find something new. And for this, it also, courage moves you on. Courage is extremely important for a lot of people. And it's also something that we don't have a lot of for a lot of people as well. And courage is that which will help you to embrace, bring you confidence into be able to move on to a new job, new skills, new ideas, new thoughts, new innovation, all of this, the courage to move on, to take risks. And this is what is part of what is living within that nomadic mindset. Because again, from this journey that you've been on, as you understand that the nomadic cultures that I've learned from is that, and I would like to say that it's probably across most of the nomadic cultures and indigenous cultures, is that the adaptability is crucial. They live a very simple life. They have very few things and possessions. So they travel lightly. For us in the modern world, some of us have just way too many things in our houses, possessions, also around our offices, too many different projects, all of these things, and they become heavy burdens at sometimes and sometimes not. But we need to be able to find out when to be able to use those. Let me share with you a little bit more, because I think all of us who are here today, whether you are a leader, professional decision makers, or curious minds, you understand at some point in your life, in some situation, whether it be in just in our everyday, is to move on. We need to move on past the things that are holding us back, which are trapping us. We need to be able to see that organizations today, teams today, need that freedom. And one of the people that is here today, Andy, he is really a proponent with his work about the frontline workers, is giving them the strength and the capability to be able to move on and take decisions and to be able to feel some sort of strength and accountability for what they do. And this is very, very important for all of us. So with that, I want to start with this question is, what if you embrace never settle for too long as a way to be, a way, a way to be, a way to behave, a way to innovate, a way to lead, a way to coach, a way to everything, having this as a central principle. So a question that we come back to is, what's the opportunity? Where do I go from here? All in questioning yourself so that you are able to move forward and help yourself to move forward. And it's not easy sometimes. I totally get that. So with that, I truly totally want to say that this particular quote from my book in the chapter Never Settle for Too Long, I think brings a lot of this to in a poetic way, but it also a very practical way of understanding. Robin Lockerman, he's an MCI group president. He's a very good friend of mine, actually. And he said, when we had our conversation, he said, I believe value gets created while harvesting. A successful organization, a successful harvest requires seeds of innovation to be planted first. So we need to plant, we need to have seeds and we need to plant them in this, never settling for too long. And then we need to water and we need to make sure that they become bigger and better. So that then at some point, we then have a much better way forward and harvesting. So the harvest is at the end of that line. But we need to really understand with this, the plant, sow, and so innovate and do things differently. This is also extremely valuable to us, is to know that the seeds must be planted for never, and they will never settle for too long. They will grow. They will grow. So this is also very good. Very good. So I dare you. I dare you to move on. Now, we're going to move on just like the settlers do and the nomads do, and also from this never settling for too long, and we're going to shift and change this a little bit differently. So I want to share with you now, we are going to move into the next step. And the next step is going to take us into a more of a fireside chat. Are you ready for that? We're going to have some questions. And that's what we're going to do for this, is never settling for too long. So I have it over to you, Aggie. And I would like you to tell us about never settling for too long in the speed of change, in the speed of understanding that in the speed we think of is the Formula One. So do share with us your experience. And I really think this is fantastic to be able to.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And while you all settle in for the fireside chat in a yurt or by a campfire under the blue sky or under the starry sky, I'm happy to share and happy to confirm that what you find in Kevin's book about Formula One and how fast the change of tires happen, it's absolutely true. I was fortunate enough to witness it while I worked for the Hungaroring, for the Hungarian Grand Prix. And, um, and it goes very quickly. And it's also really interesting that um, the calendar, the race calendar takes the teams to different continents. So they are constantly, almost constantly on the move. They are modern nomads, speedy nomads. But when they arrive to the racetrack, usually they arrive on the race weekend, Monday or Tuesday. They settle in. They arrive, they find their place, they empty the huge trucks, they set up all the instruments, everything they need to prepare the cars in their assigned pits, and they start working. And then they are fully present. Everybody knows what his or her job is. They are masters of their profession, and they work together like clockwork. The race is finished on a Sunday, usually 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. 2 hours later, you don't find even a tiny screw in the pit. Everything is packed, cleaned in the trucks. They are ready to go. They are ready to move on. Because with the calendar that takes them on 5 continents, they cannot settle for too long. They have to be on the move. And it's beautiful to see and ties in nicely in this episode.
Yeah, and it's also wonderful how that is also a metaphor in many ways for relating to organizations as well, because it's exactly what happens in innovation and also organizations which are working towards projects and also their bottom lines, as well as looking at the different visions that they're always creating, because the creation of this is never settling for too long. However, some settle for too long and they miss the road coming late. And so that's what we want to stop missing is the next opportunity, right? So here we go.
Then let's start with this fireside chat. Of course, so many things we could talk about, but for me, the first and most obvious question is when did you discover that you were a nomad? Did
Uh,
it happen all of a sudden, or was it a transition, a slow discovery? Please share it with us.
I think that understanding that it didn't happen overnight, and it was a slow awakening, and I must say slow because it took me many years to think about it, even though I was actually doing it. And I would say that the observation of it happened when I was sitting in a yurt, and that came about. We were talking, as I mentioned, at the same time that I said the first story, was that all of a sudden in my mind, I went into another zone and I started to connect the dots backwards of my life. And I started to connect them all the way back to my early childhood. And I remember that early childhood is that I lived on on a lake, a very large lake, an isolated community of a logging camp. There was only 400 people, but it was surrounded by mountains. And I can remember at some point when I was 4 or 5 that I looked at those mountains and I thought, what's over there? What's over the past those mountains? And that has been throughout my life as I was a student and also then as a skater and whichever. But I'm not going to go through all my life. But the point here was is that I started to look at geography and history, and all of this fascinated me. And I memorized every single country and every single capital city around the world at that time. And I became fascinated with travel, cultures, other people. But as my life went on and I moved from place to place, and the first part was I moved 1 year at a time. And people say, why are you leaving after 1 year? You're just getting started. And a lot of time people would say to me, you're running away, you're running away. And I couldn't understand what they were talking about because in my mind that I was moving from place to place to find something new, something fresh, something to learn, some knowledge, some cultures, new people. All of this was fascinating to me because it felt like growth within me. And so I think it became a very slow awakening through this time until when I hit a point in 1995 of which shifted it. And I was fired from a big job with Disney on Ice. And in that, it took a big hit on me. And it was really about my ego being hit on so many different levels. I thought this was going to be the show, and I'm going to be famous, and I'm going to make a lot of money and do all of this. Well, I got fired. And it was like the divine smack, really, is saying, okay, we're going to teach you. Anyway, what happened out of that was the first part of this awakening, I believe, is that I found meditation, I found a guru, I found spirituality, and some people say they find religion, but I found something which was what I felt was expansive. And it started to lead me into a different world of not only awakening, but awareness. And this was awareness from a very deep expansiveness of where did I want to live? What did I want to do? And of course, then I left a variety of aspects of my life and became the coach and professional speaker. And then, of course, this project, which I call the project, just like in the EBU, they call it the project, is that this is a project of my life and where I see it is an awakening not only for myself, but other people have said it's an awakening for them about their superpower, the nomadic mindset. It allows them to find freedom. And I found that as part of that slow awakening was finding that I have a dominant mindset. However, I'm able to also flow sometimes into the builder mindset as well as a settler mindset. And I think it's important that we realize that it gives us comfort that we're not just an or a but, we are an and we have so many choices that we can have. And therefore, we can continue to never settle for too long, but to reap the harvest of what we have and then to be able to move forward. So, yeah, it was a slow awakening.
Mhm. But you used some keywords which you also talked about in previous episodes. It was the curiosity. I would say that was the starting point. That you were curious and you wanted to explore more, and you really did many different things: figure skating, choreography, huge events, multi-million-dollar productions, writing, coaching, awareness, and then awakening. How and sometimes you look at it and wow, it's fantastic, but I would imagine that there were very difficult moments on this journey, and in those difficult moments, how did the nomadic mindset, even if you did not call it the nomadic mindset at that time, how did it help you to move on or to find a solution or to heal and be able to move on?
That's a great question. I mean, as I said, I didn't have this term, the nomadic mindset, at that point. But I believe that what was the most important thing here was the curiosity and the ability to adapt. And one of the things that I did in my past was that I wasn't a synchronized swimmer, but I was also a choreographer for our national world and Olympic champions in Canada back in the dark ages. But I was asked by the head of the sporting association, and she said, "What do you think of synchro?" And I said, "Do you really want me to tell you the truth, or do you want me to tell you what I think?" And she said, "What you think?" And I said, "Well, I think it's really very fake. It doesn't really have a lot of the capacity of creativity at this point in time. It's incredible technique." And so she hired me. And people in my sphere in figure skating said, "What are you doing? You have no clue about skating or synchronized swimming." And I said, "You're absolutely right. I have no idea. I have no idea." But I said, I have that they don't have is this ability to create and to be able to see what is within these swimmers, to be able to bring out their creativity. And I was willing to adapt and find a way of adaptation by collaborating with them. So this has been throughout the life is that collaboration and that is adaptability, the curiosity, is the questioning and listening and observing. All of these I realized when I was doing my research in Kenya and Mongolia, those were all traits and behaviors of all of the nomadic cultures, is that this is what keeps them alive, helps them to continue to never settle for too long, but to find new paths, is to be able to look at things from a different angle. And that, I believe, is probably the answer to that question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. And now we have a better understanding of how these traits and how the nomadic mindset helped you to move on in your life and explore new terrains. And since you have this concept, philosophy, the superpower, you have been working with many individuals, leaders, organizations, uh, multinational organization, public administration organizations internationally. How does the nomadic mindset help teams, leaders, organizations? I know it's a very general question and our time is limited, but I would like to pick and choose some examples that illustrate the point.
Uh, I think that first of all, working with teams and individuals and organizations, I think that they are now beginning to understand what is not only the nomadic mindset and how useful and important it is that I have spent time with my speeches and whichever polling, and the mindset that they seem that they need more of now is the nomadic mindset. Once they know that the three mindsets there are. And I think that what has helped them is to understand that it's not, we don't need one. We need all three. We need in an organization, we need in an individual, we need all three of these, but we need to tap into them. In other words, never settling for too long in one, but to be able to find out, if, for example, if we settle too long in an organization with one path and we see it slowing down, is that we can't just keep plugging it, but we need to find that innovation. We need to find that nomad, is to be able to bring that back so that we're seeding and so that we can harvest later along. And so it is much more organic in this particular way that I work with them. And what I see as an example with Novartis at the moment is that it's what we started off with a senior leadership team, but now it's going to the next level down to leads. And I've been told that now the managers, they got word of this and they want to do some as well to learn more about what this is. And so there becomes a new language which can help them to maneuver, to navigate through the challenges of the uncertainties, the difficulties with jobs and digital transformation, because a lot of them are not digitally transforming fast enough for the world that is circulating right now, and because of all the uncertainties. So I think that from research, there's only about 45% of organizations that are actually ready for all of this, which is not very high. It's improving, but it's not very high. So my belief in this philosophy and the way forward is to be able to start installing this into organizations, and it can be worked individually in coaching. It's also in teams, which I'm working with the teams, and also with the organization itself. One thing that I think that is important here is that because performance is extremely important with it, is that the nomadic mindset helps them to understand a greater breadth and expression. And it also helps them to understand that the work that they're doing. So with that is that how do they fit into the cogs? You know, what is they're the piece of the puzzle. How do they fit into the vision? How do they fit into the whole production line? How do they fit? How important are they? So this is what they're learning. And I'm really grateful to see what's happening.
We live in a really turbulent times, and we don't have to list what is happening around us and how much uncertainty we have to adapt to and live with. What would you say is the biggest challenge for organizations? Would it be the being future proof? Would it be to make the management in organizations future proof, or is it the teams? How do you see this dynamic? Is it the leader setting the tone? Is it the team moving the whole organization into other directions? That could be an interesting aspect to explore a bit.
Yeah, I mean, it really needs to come from the top down. And first of all, the top needs to understand what's happening. One of the things that is and what we're trying to get is alignment. And that will help the organizations to be able to move forward is alignment around values, behaviors, a team, the big vision, the North Star. This is something that is missing for a lot of people. And what I find, not only in public and private institutions, is that some people don't have any clue why they're there, and they don't have this understanding of what does that mean ultimately. So when people start to understand, then that allows them to be more adaptable, that gives them the freedom to be more adaptable, you give them more freedom to and risk, so that and to be able to, so they're able in that way to expand, but also make decisions and take accountability. So the accountability is extremely important. And with the difficult challenges of, you know, dealing with the changes that are happening in the world and to stay on top of them, and with organizations are often changing very fast, is you need to have this adaptability. And adaptability is not going to be about being sticking your legs in the sand and staying, okay, say we have to do this, we have to do this. No. And we need to be able to move. So there's that feeling of movement on an ongoing basis within organizations. So hopefully that starts that conversation. And that's what I do with organizations, is taking them on that journey, but it's that starting that conversation.
Mhm. And Andy posted a very interesting question in the chat. Never settle for too long. How long is too long? And is it a problem if you find your place? Also, for example, in an organization, I am working there. I have no clue why I am here. How long do I stay and say, okay, maybe I can figure it out. Maybe an opportunity comes. And when is the moment for me to say, okay, now I have to move on? I settled too long in a place which is not for right for me, which is not changing the way I would like it to change. So I move on. So how long is not too long?
Well, for example, I mean, every person is individual and everybody has a different timing. And everybody, because they have a different mindset in this way, is that settlers will stay on for a long period of time because that's one of the pieces, and they're the glue of the organization, and they're extremely important. And also, if you want to talk about staying in a position, is that it's very dependent on a variety of factors. So I like to say very much so that I get an internal itch, which says something's not working. I need something more. I need to expand myself. I need more knowledge. I need more skill. And this is the internal itch. And some people will go to the point of almost shifting and then pull back. But some people will take that itch and to move. And to Andy, knowing when that is really non-definable because it depends on every single person. Organizations, it probably is more definable because they may start losing value and start losing customers and start losing. Then they know they have to move on, but it may be too late. Because they ought to have been planting seeds along that way to innovate and to find new pathways so that one is we're harvesting one, that another one is growing. This is the innovation. And that is a strategy. So it's understanding those strategies as well. It's a long subject, but hopefully I've started to open that subject a bit more.
Thank you. And you have worked with many organizations, many leaders. Is there a story that stands out for you, or a beautiful example of this transformation of gathering the courage to say, okay, I've settled for too long. It's time for me to move on, either from an individual or from a team or an organization.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for that question. There's lots of examples that I can find, individual and team, and some for organizations. And I would say that one of them that stands out for me, which is fairly recent, was a woman. I was doing a team, taking people on a leadership journey, and there was a challenge within the team, and it was unspoken with one person. And I could feel that. And that person kept siding with me. And I had a lot of conversation with her. And they, HR and whichever, thought that, she's going to be the problem. And I thought afterwards, no, she's not the problem at all. Anyway, what happened was a wonderful in that short period of time, she wrote to me afterwards. And she said, and she was the only one that wrote to me afterwards. And she said, what you opened up in me was very, very important. I've been waiting for somebody to help me to move on. And you helped me to move on. And now I can see the light and how I want to lead. And not only myself, but also how I want to lead my team. And then just recently, she wrote an article about it on LinkedIn. And so I'm very grateful for that, is showing her transformation and where it's taken her. So sometimes you have to create that safety, that psychological safety for people to be able to open up. And that is an important factor within all of this, is that it doesn't just happen. It needs psychological safety. And especially the people who are settlers need a lot of safety and support. And the people that are nomads don't necessarily need that so much because they just love to dig in and go forward. However, safety in an organization is extremely important because we have many different mindsets, many different personalities. So yeah, I think that is an important aspect.
And on that topic, Yusuf shared a nice comment with us where he says that he gets this itchiness sometimes, but then it's very heavy to move. Maybe I have to sort out my baggage. So is it sometimes the baggage we have been carrying throughout our life that blocks us, and how can we deal with it? Already seeing it as a baggage is an important first step, I would say.
Yeah, so if you think about it, that people travel lightly as nomads because they don't want any encumbrances around them. They want to be able to be free and light to be able to move. That is the same thing. For example, myself, when I want to move, I want to feel light. And people said to me, okay, when you're a dancer, I said, I like to feel light. I like to be able to know that I can move. So I don't want to eat heavy food. So that's another point of being heavy food. But the point here is that what I see very, very happens in our lives is that we start off at the center of the onion, and the onion is a very great explanation. Is that little thing in the center of the onion, and then we start creating layers and layers and layers and layers and layers and layers, and at some point, the awakening happens, and we start to remove those layers, and by the end of our life, we're back into the center, hopefully, and that's what happens in our world. So it is about unloading the layers. It is about just sort of jumping. It is about knowing that taking a breath and doing it. It is about taking stuff out of your baggage, out of the luggage. And I think that that's really important, Yusuf, is to just allow yourself. And I say the word allow because this is really important. And what I noticed with the nomads, they just allow themselves to be free.
Mhm. And I would also, I mean, my personal experience was that this heavy baggage is can be physical with things around us, can be heavy eating, but can also be holding on to old beliefs, old patterns, old things, and not having the courage to say, okay, do I really need this? Is this still serving me? Yes or no? And then if the mental lightness is there, then we are much more open to new ideas, to new ways of being. Another question came from Renu, if I can remember correctly, uh, asking you that now looking back, knowing what you know about the nomadic mindset and what it means not to settle for too long, is there anything you would do differently in your life? If you could play the film over again, where would you change? Where would you have a different direction?
Well, actually, I probably would take more risks.
Mhm.
I mean, I took a lot of risks, and for a lot of people, it's really, I've been living a risky life, and I can go much deeper into all these stories of the risk being with.
I am sure a lot of people would be scared by listening to all the stories, Kevin.
Yes, exactly. But we all have stories and we all have parts of our lives. So I would say that what would I do differently is that I would become much more financially conscious and aware. Because I have spent my money I've lost money in investments like many people, and I've spent my money for my education, and so I don't feel that as a loss.
No,
But
no,
I,
that's not a lost money. But what you invest in yourself, that's I think it's an excellent, the best investment we can make.
yeah.
Of course, we need other investments so that we can support ourselves, but investing in our own growth and our own development is very, very important. A last question would be, because I'm conscious of the time. Do you have any last word of wisdom to share with us before we move to the final part of this episode?
I was thinking about this, and from what I can say is that the word that comes to me, one word, is courage. Now, many of you probably don't know what the origin of the word courage is, and I think this will help us a lot. And the origin of the word comes from the French word cœur, which means heart. So courage is related to the heart and the heart of who we are. And if you allow yourself to take that courage on, whatever the activity, the thoughts, the removing of stuff in our lives is, that takes courage, but it comes from your heart. So that is allowing you to take the courage to never settle for too long, but stay long enough to reap the harvest.
And also this is beautiful, a beautiful closing. And I hope this answers, at least to a certain extent, the question of Salom about how to bring in the nomadic mindset in organizations without appearing ungrateful, neglecting opportunities, etc. So listening in, feeling what is the right next step for you, and when you feel this is what I have to do, this is what I want to say, to have the courage to do it.